Hello viewers and welcome back. Today I have a quick Assassin's Creed Shadows video, and in this video I want to go into why I think Yasuke is a bad character. Now before we get started, this has very little to do with the out-of-game arguments that are floating around YouTube and the Reddit forums and everywhere else about Yasuke. This argument is solely based around gameplay and story design. I do want to caveat this by saying that I play in immersive mode only and the dialogues in Japanese are really good. Conversely, from what I have seen, the dialogues in English are very bad. So when I say that a story or dialogue is good, I am referring to the Japanese version, not to the English. With that said, let's go ahead and get started, and if you like this content, please hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. So the first issue that I have is the poor story design. And what do I mean by this? Basically, we start the game with a very brief introduction to Yasuke that shows him being accepted. I think claimed is probably a more accurate term here by Nobunaga. And then we have a very quick, very basic combat tutorial, and in total this is what, maybe like 15-20 minutes, and a lot of it is cutscene. Then we go to Naue. We play through her opening story, some of her backstory, and do a bunch of mainline quests with her, and we really spend about 10 to 15 hours interacting with the game through Naue's eyes. Then at 15 hours in, Yasuke suddenly returns as our quote-unquote co-protagonist, and this is bad story design. A lot of players, myself included, have already invested a lot into Naue. We strategized our build for her, we built her masteries out, went out, got her gear, and put at least a little thought into making choices that would help us to define her as a character or as the character we want her to be. And there's really zero incentive or reason for any of us to happily switch to playing another main character, be it Yasuke or anyone else. Adding on to this is that Naue is, in my opinion, one of the best protagonists that the Assassin's Creed franchise has had, at least in recent memory. Her transition from being a somewhat wide-eyed girl to being a more hardened assassin is cliched, but it's likable. Her smaller size and her emphasis on speed and agility make her feel kind of like an underdog, which is something that most players enjoy playing. Now, switching to a different perspective is something that can be done with moderate success in games, but doing so is difficult, and the character that's brought in late needs to be incredibly compelling, both from a story and a gameplay perspective. And here's the second problem. Yasuke lacks a compelling story and compelling gameplay, and in any type of story, the main character needs a powerful hook at the start. This is the event or sequence of events that will pull us as the player, reader, watcher, whatever, into that story. It's what makes us want to continue on to see how the main character resolves whatever problem the hook introduces. And in Naue's case, the hook is the destruction of her people and her father being murdered right in front of her, and this hook is very frequently used, possibly overused, but it's also very powerful, hence why it is used so much. And I think Shadows does a pretty good job with Naue, at least in immersive mode. You can really feel her sense of loss, and it makes you want to continue on in her story to help her get revenge. For Yasuke, there really isn't that much of a hook. Yes, Nobunaga is his lord, and he does die, but the game never really built much on Nobunaga and Yasuke's relationship. I mean, Nobunaga takes him into his service, then compliments Yasuke as a warrior, and that's nice, but my commanding officer telling me, hey Sergeant, you did a good job there, doesn't really build a deep personal relationship. It's just transactional business. Added on to that is the fact that we've been playing 10 to 15 hours as Naue, and Nobunaga has been built up as the arch villain. Even though there's a brief scene where we find out he's not really the arch villain, that doesn't override the sense of satisfaction that we get from killing him. Even though we know he's not the primary enemy now, we still feel like we are advancing Naue's story, and that is going to lead to some sort of satisfaction and feeling of accomplishment. So Yasuke's plot hook, which is needed to get us interested in his story, doesn't really exist, and even then, what little there is only exists because of Naue's story, so it makes him feel much more like an NPC companion than a co protagonist. And that's before we get to the gameplay, which is really not that great. And Yasuke is meant to be a tank to now a stealth slash agility build, and on paper, it's a good concept. The problem is that this is Assassin's Creed, not Elden Ring. The combat is pretty easy, and I can't think of any Assassin's Creed game where I felt the need to be tankier. So it's sort of creating a role to fill a niche that, in the context of this game, doesn't exist. What's worse is that because the combat is pretty easy to start with, Yasuke feels very overpowered. Now, before you say that I haven't tried the game on the hardest difficulty, I have played the game on nothing but expert. And even when you do take damage, Yasuke can take quite a few hits and he can get an ability that heals him for a substantial amount every time he gets a kill. Once again, Assassin's Creed is full of chaff enemies, and this means that he has a lot of healing, and in general, he just feels very overpowered and not very fun to play because there's no real challenge. Moreover, Naue, by 15 hours in, can be a very strong melee combatant herself, and while she can't stand there and get poked with spears for 5 minutes straight, this is actually a good thing. It gives us the feeling that we need skill to play her, which in turn makes successful combat feel much more rewarding and fun. It also makes us take more interest in making sure that she has the right gear and the right build, once again, thereby making us invest a lot more into her as opposed to Yasuke, because we don't really feel that much of a need to invest anything into him because he's overpowered as he is. So, as I said at the start, I think Yasuke is just a bad character. That's really a shame because his voice acting, once again in immersive mode, is pretty good. Some of his storyline quests are interesting as well. Unfortunately, these are marred by some very uninteresting gameplay and by the fact that he's introduced very weakly and way too late to make him feel like a natural co protagonist. He feels more like an afterthought or something that was awkwardly inserted into the story. A better way to do this would have been to go with the method they used in Odyssey and Valhalla. Naue slash Yasuke would be brother and sister or friends who grew up together, and at the start of the game, you choose to play as one or the other, with options to switch back and forth as time goes on. They'd be on the same side, and you'd be exposed to both and able to develop whichever one or both, depending on your personal preferences, that you want to. If you must run a dual protagonist system, this is the way to do it, not by making one of them feel like an afterthought. Honestly, though, I'll close this video with my own opinion, and maybe a lot of people will disagree with me. Let me know in the comment section below, but I think this is really the best solution moving forward. I think Assassin's Creed needs to ditch the idea of these pre-scripted characters and instead move to what many games do, where you can create your own character. Ubisoft can still dictate the name for dialogue purposes, but let players determine the appearance. If you want Yasuke to look like a Japanese person or a Viking or an African, you're free to do that. It's your choice, it's your character. You have the agency to control what that character looks like. But let me know what you guys think. Am I wrong about Yasuke? Am I missing something that does make a compelling character to you? Let me know, and as always, take care until the next time.